Hello, good morning. This is your video lesson for Thursday, October 30th for New Visions English. As I mentioned yesterday, I'm sorry that I cannot be in class with you today, but in today's video, I'm going to go through the introduction to film analysis PowerPoint, which is not currently posted, but I'll make sure it is posted by the time you are watching this. Um, Yesterday in class, if you were not there, we went over the directions for essay number 2, which is going to be more of an analytical essay, in which you are going to analyze one or more ads, commercials essentially portraying AI products or services. So if you were not in class yesterday, I would probably read through essay number 2 directions before watching this video. Today, though, we're going to go through some things with analysis and some things with film analysis. So again, this PowerPoint will be posted for you by the time you're watching this today. So let's back up a little. There's a few different parts and a few different things I'll go through in this video. But let's start with just a general, what is analysis? Analysis, I think people tend to think of it in relation to English class because that is probably where you do the most analyzing in K-12 school at least. But all fields, all occupations involve analysis to some degree. Analysis involves studying something by breaking it down into parts in order to make a conclusion about the whole. So in English class, usually this comes from maybe analyzing literature. Maybe you'll read a short story or read a book and you'll look at what choices did the author make? How did they write their sentences? Did they use any literary devices and so on? Ultimately, the purpose of doing that is to, as I put there, make a conclusion about the whole or come to some sort of a greater thesis or a greater argument about the text or the whole of whatever it is you're analyzing by really looking in greater depth at all of the different parts and all of the different ways that this thing is operating. So I have a little bit of an example. A little bit of an example here. This is one of the, maybe not one of the first, but it's one of the first AI ads from Google that really kind of caught public attention. This ad was pretty severely roasted. Most people thought it was not a very good ad. But I thought we could take a look at this and then I will go through some steps and some things to think about as you're analyzing in general, and then some things that you can use to analyze film and commercial specifically. I don't think I'm going to play it this way. I'm going to do it a slightly different way just to make sure that you can hear it, because sometimes Zoom is weird about audio stuff. Oops, and I still didn't click the button I wanted to click. Sorry, let's see. This is what I want, and then I want share sound, optimize for sharing. All right, so here is the Google ad that we'll use as an example in this video.
My little girl's always been a runner, just like me. I've always thought she was following in my footsteps. Hey, go get her, baby. But lately, she's been looking up to someone else. She might even be the world's #1 Sydney fan. And like Sydney, she's focused on her technique. Good job, baby. Accelerate out the curb. High knees. There you go. She wants to show Sydney some love, and I'm pretty good with words, but this has to be just right. So Gemini, help my daughter write a letter telling Sydney how inspiring she is. And be sure to mention that my daughter plans on breaking her world record one day. She says, sorry, not sorry. You got this. Let's go.
So I'm not sure if I mentioned that, but that was actually for the 2024 Olympics, I think. So let me pull my PowerPoint back up. All right, so here are some general steps to analyze. let's see, with that ad kind of being used as a little bit more of a specific example. Um, so the first thing, and again, these three steps that I have are a little bit more, uh, you're not necessarily going to always do them in a very rigid order. I know we talked about this a little bit with, some of the process things with essay number one as well. It's not always like you're going to start by observing, then interpret, then conclude. It's always a little more fluid, moving between the three steps. But just to give you a general idea, you would almost always probably start by making observations about the thing you're analyzing or the ad you're analyzing. So in this case, what parts or features immediately jump out at you? If you were actually going to be analyzing that Google Gemini ad, you would almost certainly want to watch it more than one time, right? I'm sure with just one read, if you will, or one watch of that video, some things probably immediately jumped out at you. But I bet if you were to watch it, 2 or 3 times, you might notice more details, and you might just, in general, take in more information about what you're watching. So some of the observations that I made, I put in the little chart over there. These don't need to be super thought out at this point. This is just me kind of collecting some information from the ad. There's many still images, videos of a young girl and her father. The girl is shown at like various ages, so she's shown growing up. Some images show the girl and or the father training, while others show them smiling, hugging, interacting positively. I put the quote in there. Father states his daughter has always been a runner just like me. There's images of them both wearing medals. So again, I'm kind of moving a little more between the different stages. But if I were to interpret that, I would say, well, because there's those images of them both having medals or wearing medals, they're probably pretty good runners, right? Another thing I observed, of course, is that there are some shots of Google products all throughout, and all of the products use AI in some way. So the first time we see Google, they were doing a search for that athlete, Sydney. I don't remember the last name. Obviously. Well, I'm just going to do the observe part right now. So they did a Google search for her. Then the father did a search for teaching someone how to do a better hurdle. And then finally, the most obvious, I guess, example of Google in the ad is that in the very end, we can kind of see and learn that the narration that the father character is doing is actually being used to prompt Gemini, and he's asking Gemini to compose a sentimental letter to this athlete that his daughter admires. Soft emotional music, etc. I noticed the camera kind of moves during a lot of the shots. So again, I'm just kind of taking in visual information to a point I'm interpreting, but the next thing you do once you kind of maybe watch the ad or the video a few different times, then you start interpreting. So what do these features suggest or imply? And do you notice any patterns? So in this page, this is where I start to kind of make more value judgments, and I talk about things maybe in more of a explicitly positive way or an explicitly negative way. So I mentioned the camera motions, which are often kind of jerky, often give off a feeling of these being home movies, not like professional Google recordings for a very high budget commercial. The home pictures and movies create an inspiring and happy mood. Maybe it makes me feel nostalgic or reminds the viewer of their own memories of growing up or their own memories of hanging out with a parent or hanging out with a child. The end of the ad, where it is suggested the girl will someday break her idol's record, feels celebratory, feels empowering. And the change in music kind of also supports the celebratory vibe of the commercial at that point. And then all three Google use cases shown are relational in nature, right? So the first Google search, when they're looking up that athlete, Sydney, I guess the term would potentially be a parasocial relationship. The girl is looking up to this athlete who has inspired her clearly. So that's relational in a way, right? Even though the athlete doesn't necessarily know about the girl yet, it's still a way for the young girl to find a role model and find an inspiration for her in her own training. Then the second use case of Google is when the father character specifically looks up ways to teach the daughter how to improve her hurdle technique, which I thought was interesting. That's something my mind made a mental note of as I was watching the ad more than one time. He wasn't necessarily just looking up, how do I hurdle better? He was specifically looking up how do I teach someone to hurdle better? So again, that feels like a very intentional choice Google's making, right? To show all of the different ways, their product could potentially be used in more of a socially positive way, to sort of support this bonding experience between the father character and the daughter character. And then, of course, the final, most obvious case of using Google here was the third one, where the father prompts AI to write the sentimental letter to Sydney, the athlete. And then this is kind of where I make my interpretation a little bit. While all three uses show AI in some way, the first two examples, when this ad came out in 2024, were probably seen as relatively normal, right? Even though they're specifically showing like the AI summary of this athlete Sydney's career. And you see it's the same thing, like the AI summary when the father's asking, how do I teach someone to hurdle better? Even though that, I guess, is a new feature, if you will, of Google, that's obviously incredibly similar to just doing a normal Google search that has existed for 20 plus years at this point. So that is my interpretation, right? The first two uses of Google probably read as pretty normal to the viewer, while the third, using Gemini to write a sentimental letter, probably does not feel or read as very normal to the viewer of this ad. So again, everything on this page is my interpretation. Certainly the idea of analysis is that it is my interpretation, right? Maybe somebody else could and I'm sure somebody else could read or watch this ad and maybe not feel nostalgic, maybe not get celebratory or empowering vibes from it. Those are my own interpretations based on all of the different things that I observed in the ad. Now here comes the part where I, as an English teacher, find it very, very fun. I know that not everybody likes analysis. I always really enjoy writing analytical stuff. So forgive me if my example here, maybe I had a little too much fun writing this. But once you make your observations, once you kind of get a general sense of your interpretation of those features that you observed, then you attempt to make conclusions. So based on your observations, make a claim supporting your thesis. How does the subject you are analyzing work? How does this Google ad work? I'll kind of show you my example here. Again, this is me having maybe a little too much fun analyzing, but this is maybe how I would analyze this Google ad. Through the father's assertion that he is pretty good with words, but the letter to Sydney needs to be just right, Google implies that even for people who are naturally skilled at writing, their best efforts are not at the same level as Gemini. It leaves the audience with the message that all writing must be polished, well organized, and error-free, including the emotional or personal correspondences, where these technical aspects of writing are often thought to matter the least. This messaging is likely designed to create insecurity in the viewer, who may start doubting their own writing abilities and questioning the parts of their own life where they may need to get their words just right using technology. By packaging this message within an ad full of overly sentimental and homemade images, narration, and music, Google suggests that the user will not lose any of the emotional resonance of their words by using Gemini. Instead, the Oops, I think I made a typo there. I meant interspersed shots of Google products are portrayed as unobtrusive and actually helpful in building emotional connections with others. The daughter uses Google to learn more about an inspiring role model, and the father uses Google to become more prepared to teach his daughter a new skill. These familiar Google searches do not get in the way of the family's touching moments, so surely writing with Gemini will also not get in the way of the daughter's ability to express her authentic feelings for Sydney, the ad seems to argue. So what I was attempting to do with my analysis here was to clearly ground my conclusions in things that were directly shown in the ad, right? That first paragraph, for the most part, I'm just analyzing the quote that the father says. I'm pretty good with words, but this letter needs to be just right. On a quick first watch, I was kind of wondering, I wonder if Google is kind of playing with the dumb jock stereotype. Like, is this family, really athletically gifted? Is that why maybe they feel the need to use Gemini to write this letter? But then I realized the opposite. This guy is actually saying, no, I'm kind of a good writer. I'm pretty good with words. And once we get to the end of the ad and we learn that the whole narration, the whole script is actually directly what he's typing into this Gemini prompt. The narration, the script sounds good. This guy probably is a good writer, right? So for me watching this, that makes me realize, that maybe Google perhaps is trying to shift the cultural perspective of writing, or trying to shift the way we all think of writing, and trying to potentially make us all believe that all the writing we do needs to have this perfect, polished, grammatically correct quality to it. Because that's one of the few things that AI, especially in like 2024, can actually do. Sure, it can clean up your grammar and organize your paragraphs. But I don't know. That I guess is kind of what I was trying to convey in that first paragraph, that maybe the strategy of this ad is to make us all kind of doubt our own writing abilities, so that we feel the need to polish or double check our writing with Gemini. And essentially that analysis mostly comes from the quote there. Then in the second paragraph, I'm basing my analysis on some of the images, some of the music, and trying to, the mood of the ad being kind of nostalgic, kind of inspiring. Oops, 1 second, sorry. Just gotta
You are
clear one
currently the
thing.
only person in this conference.
Sorry, I lost my train of thought a little, but in that second paragraph, I tried to use some of the other information from the ad to kind of show that Google is arguing that, if you are insecure about your writing, you're not necessarily going to lose the emotions behind your words just by using this product. So this is just my little example here, but essentially this is kind of the process of analyzing, if you will. And again, you're probably going to move between the steps of making observations about the things you're analyzing, interpreting the things you analyze, and then making your conclusions a little more fluidly than, doing them one at a time. But this is essentially what analysis is in one example for you. So when you're analyzing things, you should generally look for patterns. You will always, always, always make more observations about a thing than you can reasonably analyze. For example, you cannot analyze every single play in a 2-hour sporting event. I'll stick with that example. Let's say you watch the Super Bowl and you want to know why Team A lost. You're not going to be able to include every single thing that happens in that 2-hour sporting event in your analysis. You're going to kind of have to pick and choose the key moments or the key plays to analyze. So the goal is to look for broad patterns that can help you make a conclusion about the things as a whole. First, what evidence jumps out at you, and then what patterns can you find between or among the evidence that jumps out at you. Um, let's see. So you also will have to select the most the most relevant evidence, because you cannot realistically analyze every observation that you make, and choose the evidence that most relates to the patterns you find. You will want to include supporting evidence in your analysis, but you will also likely want to include any strong opposing evidence that you might find. If you find an outlier that does not follow your pattern, acknowledge it and explain why your interpretation still stands. However, some observations will neither support nor oppose your analysis. If it's irrelevant or seems unimportant, generally it can and should be left out. So for example, my analysis of this Google ad was very much about what Google wanted us to think about writing. So there are certainly some shots in here that just aren't really relevant to my analysis, like, the globe, I don't know, the shot of just the track by itself. They don't support my analysis. They're also not going against my analysis, where I might need to engage with them as a little bit of a counter argument. There's going to be plenty of things that are neutral evidence, I guess. They don't support or oppose your analysis. So those types of things can certainly be just left out. Let's see. One more thing I wanted to quickly note here. Don't worry too much about the author's intent as you're analyzing something. There's a very famous theory, I guess, in English and literary criticism called death of the author, which essentially argues that once a text or once a piece of media or a piece of content is put out in the world, the original intent behind it, the original intent of the author, can never really be known at that point, and it doesn't really matter at that point. So to give you an example of that, my analysis here, I was essentially saying that Google is trying to make us all insecure about our writing. That may or may not be what Google actually wanted us to think, right? There may or may not have actually been a team of marketing professionals who were sitting at a round table saying, we want this ad to make people feel insecure. Maybe they had a totally different intention. Maybe they're like, we want people to feel empowered by all the sports imagery in the ad. So the goal of analysis is never to perfectly guess the intentions of the author or the creator of the piece of media. It's just to make your own logical observations and interpretations and conclusions based on what is present in the text. And that may or may not actually line up with what the creator of that piece of media or piece of content had in mind. All right, let's see. This is kind of like part 2 of the PowerPoint here. I did not make a super clear note for myself of when I started recording today, but I think I'm still good on time, so I'll go a little further. The thing I love, let me actually, here, I'm gonna reshare one more time. Change some settings. All right, I like this view better, sorry. The thing I love about analyzing film and commercials and visual media is that you have a lot of data. There's a lot of different things potentially that you can analyze. Whereas maybe if you're analyzing a book like Frankenstein, you really only have one, type of evidence, and it's the words on the page, right? But the beautiful thing about analyzing film is that not only do you have words and dialogue and narration, but you also have the visuals of the film. You have the auditory information of the film. You have the choice of actors or actresses in the film. There's so many different types of evidence and so many different modes, I guess, of information that you can take in. So in my opinion, I kind of feel like that makes film a little easier to analyze. Let's see. Here are just some possible elements that maybe will stick out to you as you're observing some of the ads that maybe you will choose to analyze. There's, of course, the narrative elements, right? The narrative structure, the plot, the characters, essentially what is happening in this ad. Why did they choose a father and a daughter? All of the more like plot-based things are there for you to analyze. But you also have sound, the dialogue, narration, or voiceover. Is there music in the ad? Background noises or ambient sounds. You have the more cinematic elements like the camera views, camera angles, camera movements. I certainly did that a little bit in my example where I talked about how the slightly kind of jerky camera gave off a home movie feel. Sometimes there's transitions between scenes or cuts. Then you have the visual type of evidence. You have the setting, any props that are used, costumes. In film analysis, costume is really just whatever the person's wearing. So, even jeans and a hoodie would be considered the costume if that's what the characters on screen are wearing. Doesn't need to be like a Halloween costume. I know we got Halloween coming up. Really any like clothing choices would count as the costume. There's facial expressions, there's colors or color schemes. Is the color red coming up a lot? That's certainly something you can analyze. And then any symbols or motifs, especially like visual ones, if something like that keeps popping up, that's something great to analyze. Then there's also contextual elements. And by context, I kind of mean like things that you would need to potentially go outside the world of the ad to get a full analysis of. So for example, use of celebrities in the case that maybe there's a celebrity appearing in the film or the ad. Are there any references or allusions? Cultural or political context. So for example, that ad that we just watched was appearing at first in the 2024 Olympics. So, what's the cultural context of that? What do we expect maybe from an ad playing during the Olympics? What do we think of when we think of the Olympics? All of that like contextual stuff could potentially play in to an analysis of that ad. And then certainly genre is another potential thing to think about as well. Obviously, we talked about genre a little bit at the beginning of the course, but genre is really just a set of conventions for a certain type of writing. So, does an ad kind of follow the conventions we expect when we think of a commercial? Or, sometimes in the case of like Super Bowl ads, sometimes they're really kind of pushing at those boundaries of what a commercial is a little bit more, because those are typically what we think of as the most innovative or creative commercials. So, how does this piece of media or this text you're looking at either conform to or push against the boundaries of the genre that it's a part of? All of that is great stuff to analyze as well. Let's see. So by all means, you're not going to want to analyze every single one of these things in a 5-page analysis essay. That's going to be way too much. So, I'm going to give you some definitions. You can kind of maybe think of this as like a little bit of a word bank. I just kind of want you to have some of these terms and ideas in your mind in case it helps you to convey the ideas that you're trying to convey about whatever ad or ads you choose to analyze. But by all means, there's going to be way too much stuff here. So, don't try to shoehorn these into your paper, essentially. If they fit, that's wonderful. But you very much might not end up using a lot of these terms. But I'm going to give you some basic vocabulary that may or may not, hopefully it will, might help you in analyzing whatever ads you choose. So in film, there's essentially 2 different types of sound. The first one being what's called diegetic sound. Diegetic sound is sound that takes place within the film's universe. It is sound that the characters themselves can directly hear. For example, if characters are at a party and there's music playing on a radio, and we can assume that the characters can hear this music playing, then the sound is diegetic because it's within universe sound that they can all hear. That is opposite to non-diegetic sound, which is sound that is only there for the audience's benefit. The characters within the film world cannot hear it. For example, if there's background music added over a montage scene, that sound would be non-diegetic. Potentially, for example, that loud song that comes on at the end of the Google Gemini ad, as the father is like getting his response from Gemini, that's probably non-diegetic sound, right? We don't assume that the father and daughter are like literally sitting there listening to that song. So because that music does not take place within the universe of the film or the commercial, it would be considered non-diegetic. Let's see, some visuals. There's this French term, mise en scène, which essentially refers to all of the different visual elements of a film or theatrical production. In the case of like film, everything that the audience can see encompasses the mise en scène. So it's like all of the visuals in a particular shot. That could include the scenery, the props. If there's an actor who's in the shot, it would include them. It would include their facial expressions, their costume choices, makeup, hair choices, all that. It would include lighting, because lighting, of course, very much influences what we would see on the screen. Color choices, again, is there a lot of red in this scene? Is it a lot of pastel colors? That all definitely encompasses the mise en scène. And then the placement and positioning of physical elements. So where are things positioned in the shot? Let's see. Do I want to go any further? I don't think I do. I feel like I wish I had made a note to myself. I have a timer here, but I forgot to turn it on of how long I was recording so far. But I think I've probably almost recorded for 40 minutes. So I think I'm going to pause there for today. Let me think. Is there anything else I want to say? No homework today. If you get a chance, the one thing that might be helpful to start doing would be that it might be helpful to start maybe taking a look at some of the commercials and seeing if you have any other ideas for commercials that I didn't include on this list. I imagine probably that watching the commercials would be something, or at least doing a first watch of the commercials might be something that is a little better or easier to do at home when you don't have 7 classmates around and it's a little more chaotic. So that's something I would maybe recommend. Could be a good time to do a first watch and just start kind of collecting ideas for your paper. But that's all for today. Thanks so much. Sorry again that I could not be there with you today, but I will be back tomorrow. I hope you all have a great day, and I will see you soon. Bye.